Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Joe's Pub. I know you know where you are, and we're delighted to see you. And after many a moon, there's a program honoring Joseph Papp during the first 12 years that the Shakespeare Festival began. I was there at the very beginning and had the good fortune, as someone who was doing odd jobs, to be able to see a production and meet Joe Papp in the summer of 1956. And many of you can ask your grandparents what a good time everybody was having back then. And they had a production of Julius Caesar using a soundtrack from the film Quo Vadis, which was wonderful music, but somehow was not appealing to someone who had done some Shakespeare music for Howard University when I lived in Washington. And I remember seeing these wonderful actors out in the Lower East Side in some park, and they'd made a theater out of whatever was there. And then a woman named Mary Lou Fitch, who was an accompanist for the Mary Anthony Dance Company and a terrific pianist, didn't read or write music. And since I was going to Manhattan School of Music, in addition to playing jazz with Charles Mingus, was studying orchestration and composition, he said, "You know how to write this stuff down. Get some students from the school to write the fanfares and that type of thing. I don't know how to do that." So I met Joe Papp and the director, Ralph, and they both had on Chesterfield jackets. And they were in the little church, the Emmanuel Church on, I think it was East 7th Street. I lived between B and C on East 8th Street, and it wasn't a fashionable neighborhood in 1956, to put it mildly. And during that same summer, I met Woody Guthrie, whom I worked with and wrote a symphony in his honor, and also the wonderful author Jack Kerouac, and Joe Papp. And someone said years later to Joe, "What did you guys have in common?" And Joe responded, and I wrote it down, "We were all total zeros." And I only mention that because we didn't start off with a grant or with anybody's support or anything. We were just a group of people, all of whom knew each other and admired each other and shared the dreams of doing something in addition to our various day jobs. Joe was an assistant at CBS as a floor manager. And they decided to do Titus Andronicus. And since Mary Lou had asked me to do the music, I went to see Joe and Ralph in their Chesterfield coats in this super tiny church on the Lower East Side, only a block from where I lived. And Joe, years later, was asked, "What was it like? Why did you choose that guy?" And he said, "He looks so strange. I figured he must be talented." And Joe had a way, until he left us, of always finding young people who had something, or older people who had something that might not have ever even had a job in New York, and he could see the beauty part or the gifted part that none of us even knew that we had. He was that way, and he stayed that way. And one of the remarkable things about him that wasn't, with all the vicious gossip and stuff and jealousy, people forgot that that was his very beginning. And finally, before I introduce you to Gail Merrifield Papp, who will tell us so much about the early years, when I met him and started on Titus Andronicus, before he came to Central Park, he said, "I was brought up in Brooklyn, New York, and in my household, we spoke Polish, Yiddish, and a little English." And he said, "I went to a library that was free and got the idea it would be great to do Shakespeare, because I got a Shakespeare book out of the library and loved it." And he said it would be great to do something free, just as I had been able to get that book for free, and do it in New York City, and for anybody and everybody of every station in life to be able to come and see Shakespeare for free. Not homogenized, adulterated Shakespeare, but the best we could do for free. And it was kind of in 1956, that was already not only an impossible dream, but kind of almost revolutionary. And the beautiful thing is that he stayed that way. And when he did Chorus Line and Hair and all those things that were huge hits, which he was responsible for developing at this wonderful public theater, he took the share of the money and put that back into Shakespeare in the Park. And today we have the Shakespeare Festival that people come from all over the world to see, and other cities are doing the same thing. I wanted to mention that because the beginnings of the Shakespeare Festival were very humble, to put it mildly. And when we did the first summer, we did Romeo and Juliet and Two Gentlemen of Verona, and also a production of As You Like It. And I'll tell you a little more about that when we do some of the music. But one of the people who has so much knowledge, who came in 1967, that was the year my last year of 12 years of being the composer in residence with this festival, and became composer in residence with the New York Philharmonic. And the music that you heard was for my King Lear Variations for Wind Symphony, which I conducted, the New York Philharmonic played it, but the tune, the melody, the theme was something that I wrote for a production of King Lear. Joe was an inspiration to everyone that knew him. And so please don't think of him as a mythological figure. He was someone from Brooklyn, New York that had a dream and spent his whole life pursuing that dream. A wonderful role model for all of us in whatever we do to do better than is expected. And the person who can tell you so much of the history of how the public theater came, how Joe also wanted a place. I don't know if he even expected it to be named after him, called Joe's Pub, because Joe himself was a wonderful actor and a wonderful singer, but he wanted this kind of feeling to be part of the theater world, and the theater world to be part of the music world, and for all of the arts to be appreciated and affordable, and for everyone, every place, and from every culture that was not represented in the fine arts at that time. It's an amazing thing and a good role model for all of us how we should try to behave. So I'd like to introduce now an extraordinary person who was not only married to Joe and wonderful to him and gave him a beautiful life, but also one of the people who worked here for, I guess, 30 years. And she came just about the time, just before I was leaving, and all of this public theater and Joe's Pub and the Shakespeare that we know about in the park with the extraordinary actors, she was helpful and responsible for creating, and most important, to keep that spirit of artistic integrity, caring for other people, and having it be something that was community felt, and doing Shakespeare in a special, honest, honorable way. So please give a warm welcome to someone that we all admire, without whom there probably wouldn't be a Joe's Pub anymore, or public theater as there is now, which was a help to off-Broadway, to Broadway, to the theaters world everywhere in the United States and even overseas. Gail Merrifield Papp.
Hello. Welcome. I'm so glad to see you here at Joe's Pub. This is going to be an interesting evening, and my part in it is to give you some background for David Amram's Music of the Bard, which is a simply amazing history. And what I'm going to be doing before we hear some of the songs that he composed for Shakespeare in the early days of this theater is to give you a slideshow about his remarkable collaboration with Joe Papp in the very early days before the Public Theater, when it was called the New York Shakespeare Festival, and it was performing around town, mostly in parks. So I'm going to be doing some slides. Here we have Joe and David at a rehearsal of King John at the Delacorte Theater in 1967. But that was just the beginning of their long and quite amazing collaboration, which was over a period of 38 productions and 12 years. And so this is my salute to that legendary collaboration. And that's the first photo in my slideshow. David wrote the music for all those productions. He worked with 10 different directors, as well as Joe on 11 productions that Joe directed. And he supervised the sound for the ones that he didn't compose the music for. So it's just an astonishing amount of work and collaboration. It was really very significant and wonderful. So I'm going to show you what David looked like back in those days. That's him. That's David Amram, around the time that he met Joe, when Joe was just starting out as a producer. And David was playing at that time with the brilliant jazz virtuoso Charles Mingus. And somebody back in the 50s then told him about this guy, Joe Papp, who was starting up something way downtown. So David decided to check it out. So he did that, and years later, Joe remembered how they met. And he said, quote, David just walked in off the street and kind of said, hey, man, and I just liked him. He was really a hip kind of musician with a tremendously bright, optimistic quality, close quote. Back then, Joe was hoping to put on Shakespeare in an East Village church, and he was telling anyone who'd listen that he was interested in the social aspects of how you use Shakespeare and the whole training process of actors. Next. The word about this soon got out among aspiring actors, and they started showing up to audition for Joe's first production, which was Titus Andronicus in 1956. One of them was young Roscoe Lee Brown up there. Even though he had an imperial presence and a really amazing voice, Roscoe had never acted in anything before. Nevertheless, he was cast in a major role, shown here as Aaron the Moor, a Roman general who drives the plot of the play. Next. Another young actor who showed up was George C. Scott, an intense person who said he never studied acting, but often sat on park benches to closely observe the people passing by him. Nevertheless, he was cast as Richard III in 1957 and became an immediate sensation. The next year, he played Jaques, the melancholy lord in As You Like It. He's the standing figure in this picture here. David Amram said, quote, "By that time, everybody was coming to see this fantastic new actor. Jaques was so great that I'd be late every night for my job, working the night shift at the post office so that I could hear him say the 7 ages of man speech," close quote. We all know what that speech is. It's the one that begins, "All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players." Next. Another aspiring young actor named Colleen Dewhurst wasn't being cast in anything at that time when she went to see George C. Scott's Richard III. She was very impressed by him, and they teamed up in 1959 here to do a staged reading for the New York Shakespeare Festival's Antony and Cleopatra. Joe, who directed them, remembered that, quote, "Colleen was very good, but George took a long time to get involved and didn't really feel his part. I guess he didn't like the fact that this guy, Antony, was so dependent on this woman." 8 years later, Colleen and George finally got married. Next. Joe went on to say that, "Later on, I directed the same play with Colleen, but with a different Antony. He also had problems with the role, but she was wonderful in the part." Colleen Dewhurst soon became famous for her powerful roles in Eugene O'Neill's plays and many other plays on stage and in film. Next. Another aspiring actor who was attracted by the rare chance to be cast in Shakespeare in those days was the young James Earl Jones, who said, quote, "At that time, being a black actor, I thought, what role can a black person play in Shakespeare?" Close quote. Here he is backstage in Central Park with a stage manager in the 1960s, on the verge of his brilliant future career. Next. James Earl Jones acted in 10 of Joe's productions in New York City's parks, starting in small parts, then doing some more interesting characters like Ajax here, a Greek prince in Troilus and Cressida, before he played major title roles in King Lear, Macbeth, and Othello. Remembering the sweep of his early experiences, Jones would later say, quote, "Being out in the elements and having to fill a different kind of space was good for American actors learning Shakespeare. Outdoors, you had the obligation of filling that space with your voice and with your presence." Next. And Jones did exactly that when he played Othello in Central Park, with Julianne Marie, his future wife, as Desdemona. It was a brilliant production directed by Gladys Vaughn, an early trailblazer when there were few women directors, whom Jones called one of the 5 best directors he'd ever worked with. Sadly, just a few days ago, on September 10th, we lost James Earl Jones, a very great American actor whose unique genius we'll not see the likes of again. Next. David Amram's music for these early Shakespeare productions was heard from stages at dozens of mostly outdoor locations, including this temporary stage that Joe put up in Central Park. The audience sat on uncomfortable folding chairs that sank unevenly into the broken up turf of the lawn. But that didn't matter because people wanted to see productions like this, Romeo and Juliet in 1957. The man in the center of this picture is Stuart Hahn, the New York Shakespeare Festival's first artistic director. And years later, Joe said that he'd never ever seen a Juliet as believable and genuine as the Juliet you see here on the right, played by Brierly Lee. Joe said, "You really and truly believed she was in love." Next. David Amram, who'd been writing the music for all of these plays, also wrote the songs for Twelfth Night that Joe directed in 1963, in which he'd cast Charlie Durning here in the major role of Feste, the royal jester to a countess. Later tonight, David will be showing rare film clips from his comic opera based on that production with a libretto by Joe Papp. I myself have never seen or heard it, so it's going to be a treat for me. Charlie Durning, who got his start in Shakespeare with Joe, became famous later playing tough guys and cops in the films. But he was such a consummate actor that and comedian, that I could easily imagine him as a member of Shakespeare's own company at the Globe Theater. I was lucky enough to see him several times in the park, which is why I included this photo of him playing Feste in my new memoir that was published last year about the public and private life that I shared with Joe in the theater. Next. A major opportunity for actors and the music of the Bard happened in 1961 when the city of New York decided to build a 2,000-seat amphitheater in Central Park for Joe's productions. Here's Joe at the construction site that year, doubtless dreaming about his first season. Next. And that amazing first season opened in 1962 with George C. Scott as Shylock in The Merchant of Venice. Joe, who directed it, said that Scott was, quote, like a biblical patriarch. He was like a wrathful God, and I encouraged that. I told him, you never turn the other cheek. Then Joe told David Amram that the music had to be something special because Shylock had never been played this way before. And David said, quote, so I wrote something that really sounded like cantorial music coming out of Poland in the 12th century from the ghettos. And George C. Scott was okay with that. Next. Scott's Shylock was followed that same year by King Lear, played by the great Jamaican actor Frank Silvera, whom you see there on the throne. And sitting on a step to the right is Lear's fool, played by the future award-winning actor Roscoe Lee Brown. David said, quote, Frank Silvera gave one of the greatest performances I've ever seen by anybody of anything. And Roscoe was sensational. And the song I wrote for him later became the theme for my piece called King Lear Variations that the New York Philharmonic played. And I don't know whether David told you this, but he was appointed by Leonard Bernstein as the first composer in residence with the New York Philharmonic, aside from playing with every great jazz musician you could ever think of. Next. And so, at last, Free Shakespeare's actors and audiences came together, joyfully united in their new home. Next. It's hard to believe that it's been 7 decades, from the time that Joe began his journey in theater and David began writing songs for the Bard. Thanks to David Amram and the expansive pathways he pioneered in his music, new generations of composers now have more expansive opportunities to work in both the theater and the other performing arts. And thanks to Joe and his trust in his original playwright, shown with him here at home, as well as Joe's unflagging belief in the principle of democratic access in the arts, actors still get a chance to do Shakespeare based on no other criteria except talent alone. Thank you. And at this point, it's my very great pleasure to make way for two wonderful actors who will help us match the theater's past with its present and future. They performed major roles in Shakespeare and have appeared in plays at the Delacorte Theater in Central Park, as well as here at the Public Theater. They're going to share with us the sound of spoken Shakespeare before the music begins tonight. And they have chosen wonderful pieces from Twelfth Night. So let's get ready to hear from Malvolio, the head servant to Countess Olivia, as he reads a forged letter ostensibly from her. And let's get ready to hear from Viola, a shipwrecked girl disguised as a boy page who works for a duke who has been sending that ostensible page to woo Countess Olivia on his behalf. So now please welcome Lark White and Peter McNally.
I left no ring with her. What means this lady? Fortune forbid my outsides have not charmed her. She made good view of me, indeed so much that sure me thought her eyes had lost her tongue, for she did speak and starts distractedly. She loves me. Sure. The cunning of her passion invites me in this churlish messenger. None of my lord's ring. Why, he sent her none. I am the man. If it be so as 'tis, poor lady, she had better love a dream. Disguise, I see thou art a wickedness wherein the pregnant enemy does much. How easy is it for the proper false in women's waxen hearts to set their forms? Alas, our frailty is the cause, not we. For such as we are made of, such as we be. How will this fadge? My master loves her dearly, and I, poor monster, fond as much on him, and she mistaken seems to dote on me. What will become of this? As I am a man, my state is desperate for my master's love, but as I am a woman, oh, now, alas, the day, what thriftless sighs poor Olivia shall breathe. Oh, time, thou must untangle this, not I. It is too hard a knot for me to untie.
By my life, what employment have we here? This is my lady's hand. These be her C's, her U's and T's, and thus makes she her great P. It is out of contempt of question her hand. To the unknown beloved, this and my good wishes, her very phrases. By your leave, wax. Soft. And the impressure her Lucrece, with which she uses to seal, 'tis my lady. To whom should this be? Jove knows I love, but who? Lips do not move. No man must know. No man must know. If this should be thee, Malvolio, I may command where I adore, but silence, like Lucrece knife, with bloodless stroke my heart doth gore. M-O-A-I doth sway my life. M-O-A-I. Nay, but let me see. I may command where I adore. Why, she may command me. I serve her. She is my lady. This is evident to any formal capacity. There is no obstruction in this. And the end. What should that alphabetical position portend? If I could find something in me to resemble that. M-O-A-I. M, Malvolio. M. Why, that begins my name. M. But there is no consonancy in the sequel that suffers under probation. A should follow, but O does. And then I comes after it. M-O-A-I. The simulation is not as the former. And yet, to crush this a little, it would bow to me, for every one of these letters is in my name. Soft, here follows prose. If this fall into thy hand, revolve. In my stars I am above thee. But be not afraid of greatness. Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. Thy fates open their hands. Let thy blood and spirit embrace them. And to inure thyself to what thou art like to be, cast thy humble slough and appear fresh. Be opposite with kinsmen, surly with servants. Let thy tongue tang with arguments of state. Put thyself into the trick of singularity. She thus advises thee that sighs for thee. Remember who commended thy yellow stockings and wished to see thee ever cross-gartered. I say go to, thou art made if thou desirest to be so. If not, let me see thee assured still, the fellow of servants, and not worthy to touch fortune's fingers. Farewell. She that would alter services with thee. The fortunate unhappy. Daylight and champagne discovers not more. This is open. I will be proud. I will read politic authors. I will baffle Sir Toby. I will shake off gross acquaintances. I will be point device the very man. I do not now fool myself to let my imagination jade me, that every device points to this. My mistress loves me. She hath commended my yellow stockings of late, and did praise my legs being cross-gartered. And in this, she manifests herself to my love, and with a kind of injunction drives me to these habits of her liking. My stars be praised! I am happy! I will be strange, stout, in yellow stockings and cross-gartered, even with the swiftness of putting on. Jovin, my stars be praised, here is yet a postscript. Thou canst not choose but know who I am. If thou entertainst my love, let it appear in thy smiling. Thy smiles become thee well. Therefore in my presence still smile, dear my sweet, I prithee. Jove, I thank thee. I will smile. I will do everything that will have me.
I used to be that tall, but since I'll be 94 in a month, I'm shrinking. Weren't those actors incredible? And Joe always did the same thing. He just got people that were starting, that he saw were gifted, and rather than having to wait till they were 74 years old and inherited enough money to pay somebody to get on stage to do something, he took people because of their ability. We have a great singer whom you've already heard is going to sing, speaking of ability. And this is a song I wrote for one of the very first plays called Two Gentlemen of Verona. It got a sensational review by Brooks Atkinson. Some of you, certainly your grandparents, would remember Brooks Atkinson, a distinguished and powerful critic, when the New York Times meant so much to whether or not anything would be acknowledged. And Jerry Stiller and Ann Mura, before they had their comedy groups, were classical actors, studied classical acting, and they did all the comedy roles. So they adopted a dog, and that became the star of the whole festival. Brooks Atkinson, like all of us, fell in love with their Jerry's and Annie's dog, and got an enormous write-up for the Two Gentlemen of Verona, largely because of that dog, whose name I don't remember, but it kind of put the Shakespeare Festival on the map long enough for Joe to continue through all the struggles that he had for years to come, because he was acknowledged by the mighty New York Times as creating this extraordinary summer festival. And this particular song, Who is Sylvia, was something, again, done in a kind of the neoclassic style. So please welcome singing it in a way that I never imagined I would hear it, certainly not back then. With all due respect to the terrific actors, all of whom have sung these simple songs, please welcome, with his accompanist Nathaniel, the wonderful Michael Kelly, singing Who is Sylvia?
Then to Sylvia
Also, in a production in 1958, we had the character of Feste, who was always similar to people had in Shakespeare's plays, who sort of like appeared sort of as a clown or a mystical figure, but was really, I think, the voice of reason, the voice of spirituality in all of Shakespeare's plays. And while he was always humorous and funny, he was also so deep that he gave a certain wonderful, melancholy, beautiful picture to all of us. And writing music for Shakespeare, it was impossible. If you followed his words, they were just so beautiful. It was almost that they told you what to do. Hundreds of composers have taken those lyrics, often popular poetry of the day, often popular songs of the day, and written their own versions. This is one that I wrote, as I mentioned earlier, the last time I heard it sung in the special a cappella style was when Joe and I were put in jail in 1971 for peacefully protesting the war. And we were in the same cell and he sang it, but more important, we have a wonderful singer, actress, and my own daughter, who's been an enormous help in putting this together. David Amram singing the beautiful song that we all know and love.
Hi, Dad.
The Wind and the Rain, accompanied by accompanied by me.
You're accompanied by you.
Oh.
Hello. So this is kind of an exciting piece for me to do because this was played at my wedding almost 18 years ago on viola, and I didn't know at the time that it was a song from anything because he never tells me anything. And then when he was putting the program together, he wanted me to do this, and I was like, okay, sure, well, that sounds fun. So we were rehearsing this summer and having a really good time, and so tonight's a really special night, and I'm glad I can be here. Ready? When that I was and a little tiny boy with a hey-ho, the wind and the rain. Against, you know what? You have these rehearsals and then life happens. And your pages are out of order, but in the spirit of improvisation, we'll go for the next verse. A foolish thing, but was a toy at the rain. It raineth every day, but when I came to man's estate with a hey-ho, the wind and the rain, gans, knaves, and thieves, men shut their gate for the rain. It raineth every day. A great while ago the world began with a hey-ho, the wind and the rain. But that's all one, our play is done, and we'll strike
the great tenor saxophonist who just left us was asked by his pianist, when are we going to rehearse? His response was, you can't rehearse the unknown. Now we have again someone who has rehearsed with Nathaniel, his great accompanist and pianist, and he's going to sing one of the pieces that we did. But just before that, we'd like to show you two very, very short videos of the opera that we wrote called Twelfth Night, a 2-act comic opera. This had 8 productions. Joe wrote the whole libretto, took the whole amazing long play and cut it down and cut it down and cut it down until it became a perfect less than 2-hour opera, which is just about the right length. And I owe it to Joe. It's been done 8 times, and his dream was to have it done someday in Shakespeare in the Park, naturally. So for those of you who might have dined at some of the finer places in New York City, and after 2 hours, they still haven't brought your coffee, and you say, would it be possible to put it in a container? And I'll take it with me because I have to go back to work. They have the great New York mantra, what's the rush? So as far as any of you who might be composers or authors or painters or anything, there is no rush. If it's beautiful, it stays beautiful. So we're going to see 2 tiny videos just made in a recent performance in Louisiana of the opera, where you'll hear how this particular theme began and was used throughout the opera. But rather than forcing you to come to Joe's Pub and hear a whole opera, you can hear just a little use of how this theme that we developed was used as Shakespeare himself did at the very, very beginning and the very, very end of Twelfth Night. And the opera naturally is called Twelfth Night.
If music be the food of love, play on. Give me excess of it, that surfeiting the appetite may sicken and so die, that strain again, it had a dying fall. Oh, it came o'er my ear like the sweet sound that breathes upon a bank of violets, stealing and giving order. Enough! No more! 'Tis not so sweet now as it was before.
And now making a fast forward 2 hours later to the end of the opera, you'll hear that same melody that Adira sang that was just sung so long ago in 1958, never dreaming it would become the Hauptstimme, as they say in the ethno-funkological circles, the main theme of, main motif of an opera. This is again the song at the end, sung by a wonderful singer-actor who did exactly the same thing with the same beautiful words of Shakespeare's. And the 2 hours in between, we hope in the next 35 or 40 years, you'll have a chance to see it done again. And eventually, someday, Joe's dream will be to have it done in Central Park with the Shakespeare Festival. And if not, someone else will do it. And as they said, or I said previously, what's the rush? We have now, just before our closing number, which will be probably your first and last experience to have a Shakespeare Festival sing-along, because we're going to ask you to end in the jolly way that we always had our opening night's parties, in which we threw for ourselves, getting hamburgers and Gallo wine as our opening celebration of each other's talents all night long. But before we do that, we're going to have one more beautiful piece sung by Michael Kelly, and it's from As You Like It. And again, the great George C. Scott was in that and just blew us all away with his performance. This is a wonderful song that was written for bass baritone. I can't even remember who sang it, but like all of the actors, they were so full of good feelings and love of Shakespeare and each one another and the audiences that it always came off as long as the writing of the music was simple and expressive. So please welcome back, singing Blow, Blow Thou Winter Wind. Wind is how we say it in modern English. but it's blow, blow, thou winter wind if you go to scholars. Please welcome back Michael and Nathaniel in their wonderful artistry, and then we'll all join together in our final sing-along.
Things keep moving.
Blow thou winter wind, thou art not so unkind as man's ingratitude. Thy tooth is not so keen because thou art not seen, although thy breath be rude. Hey ho, sing hi ho, unto the green holly. Most friendship is feigning, most loving mere folly. Then hey ho, this life is most jolly. Freeze, freeze, thou bitter sky, that dost not bite so nigh as benefits forgot. Though thou the waters warp, thy sting is not so sharp as friend remembered not. Hey ho, sing hi ho, unto the green holly. Most friendship is feigning, most loving mere folly. Then hi ho, the holly, this life is most jolly. Blow, blow, thou winter wind, thou art not so unkind as man's ingratitude. Thy tooth is not so keen because thou art not seen, although thy breath be rude. Hey ho, sing hi ho, unto the green holly. Most friendship is feigning, most loving mere folly. Then hi ho, the holly, this life is most jolly.
Now we're going to have our grand finale. As I mentioned, when we used to throw our wonderful reception parties to ourselves, when the Shakespeare Festival was really still a very humble but beautiful group of people to work with, we would celebrate all night long, entertaining one another. So in order to leave on a cheerful cheerful note, we're going to do another little piece from As You Like It. Shakespeare, I guess, wrote the words for this, no one's sure. It was kind of based on popular music of the day, and I set it to a different tempo. And we'd like all of you to sing along rather than having a torturous moment. You can either lip sync it. Milli Vanilli made a fortune until they got caught. But we don't have to worry about that because there's no people from the musical FBI here going to check out whether or not. Your part is Sweet Lovers Love the Spring. And you can watch us singing it, and then you sing along, I'll conduct you in that. And when I go like that, that means you cool it till the next time around. So we'd like to invite every one of the brilliant cast members, especially those who still are here, to come on out and join us for a curtain call to the fabulous Lark Smith. Lark Smith, that's the wonderful actress. Peter McNally, who was so terrific. David Amram, the incredible ultra historian, and thank heavens she's with us to tell us what really happened. The one and only author, and get her book because you'll love it, Gail Merrifield Papp. And two other people without whom we would be at home watching CNN and really be a drag. The founder of the Village Trip, who started this crazy idea 6 years ago, and we talked about what we hoped Joe Papp thought of doing, of getting something celebrating a community, including what's called the East Village. We called it the Lower East Side until the rents went up. And also, everyone else, did we forget anybody? Oh yes, Michael Kelly. Of course, who will sing, and then I'll conduct you all for our, we don't need to rehearse it for this. Oh, and the associate producer, who's the hardest working man in show business next to James Brown, Mr. Cliff Pearson. And that's called the Village. And it's called the Village Trip on behalf of a lot of people who are currently not living. And those who haven't expired, I'd like to say, as they used to say in the 19th century, thank you. Thank you for coming. We hope you support the Shakespeare Festival. We hope you support education in the schools, that you support all your local artists as well as those who are renowned, and encourage everyone to go to the theater, to read books, to be creative, because we're all creative, born that way until we're talked out of it. And if you decide you want to take the outrageous choice of going into the arts, you just have to feel you were put here to do it, love it, do better than is expected. Whatever you have to do to pay your rent has no bearing on your value as an artist or a person. And hope for the best. And now we're going to do our sing-along, Shakespearean sing-along of It Was a Lover and His Lass. And I'll cue you one to come in at the very end. La, 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 la. You'll hear it, you'll hear it.
It was a lover and his lass, with a hey and a ho and a hey nanny no, that o'er the green cornfields is pass. In the springtime, the only pretty ring time, when birds do sing, hey ding-a-ding-a-ding. Sweet lovers love the spring. Between the acres of the rye, with a hey and a ho and a hey nonny no, these pretty country folks would lie. In the springtime, the only pretty ring time, when birds do sing, hey ding-a-ding-a-ding. Sweet lovers love a flower. In the springtime, the only pretty ring time, when birds do sing, hey, ding-a-ding-a-ding, sweet lovers love the spring.
Thank you, everyone. But most of all, thank you to everyone on stage here. Peter McNally, Lark White, Nathaniel Lanasa, David Amram, who we've never worked with before at this festival, I don't think. Michael Kelly, who's an old hand, Wonderful Town with Jamie Bernstein and so on. And of course, Gail, who we presented last year with her wonderful memoir, and David Amram. And I have to tell you that... I'm British, as you can probably hear, the land of Shakespeare and all that. And I still live in London, but I've been fascinated with American culture and with the village since I was about 12 or 13 in the late 60s, before flights were cheap, when you kind of dreamt of coming to New York. So the village kind of existed in my mind's eye and ear because I really wanted to be Joan Baez, which I still do, really. But hey, I've kind of given up on that. And then I came here as a journalist in the 90s, and I realized that the village was about so much more than Dylan and Baez and the folk revival. It was about Eugene O'Neill and Dorothy Day drinking Eugene O'Neill under the table, and about that opening scene in Reds, where everyone, pretty much everyone who's part of that scene, including people like Edison Vincent Millay, are in that opening scene in 1913-ish. And the suffragists and the labor rights, the young Clara Lemlich, I think, who was the heroine of the Shirtwaist Fire. So much history, the suffragist movement, so much stuff happened down here, and all the artists. And I spoke to a friend of mine named Janice Ian, who wrote a very special song called At 17, or Society's Child, in fact, was her first hit when she was 14 years old. And I said, Janice, I've got this idea for a kind of festival in Greenwich Village, because I discovered there wasn't one. This was about 2012. And she said, that's a great idea. But don't just do one day, make it a week and do it every year. So I said, oh, well, okay. I didn't think it'd be too difficult. And she said, there are two people you have to have. You have to have David Amram, because he's so brilliant, and you have Doug Yeager, who's David's manager and was Odeta's manager because he's so nice. And both of those things have happened. And I saw that David was performing at what he used to call the Cornelia Street Stadium one night in May 2018, when I decided it was, as they put it, shit or bust, that I would do my first festival in September 2018, 3 days around Washington Square Park. And I went to one of David's gigs there, and it went on for 2-3 hours, maybe, lots of people. And I waited in line to see him afterwards with a letter, an actual printed letter. And I said, hello, Mr. Amram. You don't know me, but I want to start this festival celebrating Greenwich Village. And he said, I'll play. So I said, but you don't know when it is. And he said, I'll play. So I said, well, you don't know whether I'll pay you. So he said, I'll play. So I said, well, look, here's the letter. Go home and read it, and let's talk tomorrow. So he then went out to dinner. Then he drove home to Beacon. And by the time I woke, which was later than he, the next morning, there was this whole email setting out the program of what we would do for his very first appearance at the Village Trip, which included, it was a free event at the Jefferson Market Library, and he had friends from the Boston Symphony would come to play. We'd celebrate Kerouac, we'd celebrate Edison Vincent Millay, and we had lines around the block, and we crammed them in, breaking all the fire regulations. So we had that, and we celebrated Eugene O'Neill, and Suzanne Vega played the park. And it was quite a success. Didn't make any money, but it was quite a success. One way to spend money if you don't have kids or play golf. So we did it again in 2019. And here we are, 6 years later. Everyone said I'm nuts, which is probably true. But we are now a non-profit, and this is our 6th year. And I met Cliff Pearson here in 2021 through the COVID ether. And our 3-day festival, so David was artist in residence for the first year, and then we made him artist emeritus, and we bought him all these tour jackets with the kind of name on the back, which he's worn all around the world. He's got another one coming in a minute. And we installed him at the Washington Square Hotel, which is part of the history we celebrate. And Cliff and I extended it to 9 days, and into the East Village, and then to 15 days and across the village, and the geography always makes me nervous. The village, the West Village, Greenwich Village, the East Village. And we're still here. So we're a non-profit. I hope we'll stay here. And David always said we could be the next Shakespeare Festival. I thought that was kind of a bold thing, but I'd like to think we might attain it. But we couldn't have done it without David, who is the spirit of the festival. And I couldn't have done it without Cliff, who's a great partner. So thank you. Please support it. We have some kind of slightly vulgar, we didn't bring our, actually rather nice but slightly vulgar T-shirts to sell you, but we can sell you T-shirts. And there was a little note about us on the back and a QR code. So please support us, because Gail and David here are part of a great history. And the Shakespeare, you know, Shakespeare in the Park, the new Shakespeare Festival, is extraordinary because it changed not only theatre here, but theatre around the world. And of course it brought us, and Gail brought us so many wonderful things. Hair, among them, company, I think, the Normal Heart. So Gail's contribution to the public theatre has been amazing too. And it saddens me a little bit that we haven't got lines around the block for this tonight, but I know we've celebrated these two people, and we've done our best to create a very special event, which has been filmed, I think. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you, David and Gail, for having faith in us. Thank you to our two wonderful young actors for being a part of it. For Adira, for Nathaniel, who I hope is a new friend of the Village Trip, and for Michael, who in 3 years has become an old friend of the Village Trip. So please support us. Cliff, do you want to say that we have 2 weeks to run almost, or another 12 days?
All right, so the Village Trip is not just about the past. We want to make it about the future as well. So Michael and Nathaniel and Peter and Lark are part of that future, and Adira is too. So it's the next 2 weeks. It goes through September 28th. There'll be a free concert in Washington Square Park on the 28th. Go to our website, check out what we're doing. Hopefully you'll come and enjoy some of the events, and hopefully you'll support us in whatever way you can. Anyway, so it's about the past, it's about the future, it's about the present. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming, and thank you once again to David and Gail and our wonderful cast of performers. Thank you. We're honored, truly honored. Yes, sorry, I should have said that. Thank you. Thank you.